Okay, welcome back, Odyssey families. This video will be discussing functions and replacement behaviors. Let's get into it. If I can get the slide to work. There we go. It's often said that all behavior is communication. And we'll talk about sort of the ways we can, some examples of that. But maladaptive behaviors, when we look at in applied behavior analysis, when we look at maladaptive behavior, so that's the tantrums, the cry, aggression, self-injurious behaviors, they frequently occur when there's an underlying skill deficit. And that skill deficit is most often weak or absent communication skills. When you don't have the words to say no, or I don't like that, or I want to go somewhere else, that's when you see those behaviors come up. And that behavior has the same effect as those words. So if I can't say no, I'm going to figure out a different way to say no. So the example I gave down here was a student that might throw a food item instead of saying no, thank you. If they don't have the way to say no, or I don't like this, or this tastes awful, they might use some other way to do it. And they might throw that food, they might push the food away, they might push it on your plate. I've had some clients do that over the years. So they're going to do different things that will get the same effect. And we'll talk about that in a lot more detail. Let's talk about behavior though, really quick. A behavior is an act, and this is sort of, on some of my earlier videos I used to, here's the book definition, and then we're going to talk about sort of real life, but we'll talk about it both a little bit. A behavior is an act by an organism that can be observed, described, and recorded. Oftentimes you'll hear specific, observable, and measurable. And what that means is something that we're going to have a definition. You'll always see this on behavior plans in IEPs. It will say a tantrum. Well, let's give a poor example is just a tantrum. That doesn't mean anything to me. I mean, I have a guess. I have a pretty good guess of what that could be. Sleepy, that again, that's not a behavior. It's a sort of a symptom. It's something that we can describe. It's a descriptor, but it isn't really the behavior. Or cranky. People show their crankiness in very different ways. Being hangry is shown in very different ways. Some people get really snippy. Some people, when they're sleepy or they're tired, get kind of get silly. So sleepy can mean different things. Tantrum can mean different things. Cranky can mean different things. And that's where we look at all of these things. Oh, he was being aggressive. Well, how aggressive? Was that a tone of voice? Was it an action? And this is where I said that I put some examples of behavior. And these are, I pulled some, from my memory banks from BIPs, behavior plans, and IEPs that I've written. So like a tantrum could be hitting others with an open hand, yelling to be heard 40 feet away, and throwing items. Sleepy could be drooping eyes, leaning against the wall, snoring. Cranky could be a furrowed brow, tense jaw, and pushing items away. So what you want to have when we talk about the behavior, and oftentimes when I talk to parents, when we're meeting, I ask, well, really, what does it look like? Because we can always say, well, he's having a bad day. Well, what does that mean? Is he having a bad day that his tummy hurts? That he's always holding his tummy, bad day because he's sleepy? But what is it showing? What is it that he's really doing, or your client is doing, your student's doing, that's really going to show that? And so tantrum, when we say hitting others, you and I can sit in the same room or watch a video. If we're doing video training, we can sit in a room and we can watch a behavior and we can agree, okay, he's upset, but that's not a tantrum because he wasn't hitting other people with an open hand. He wasn't yelling to be heard 40 feet away, and he wasn't throwing items. He could be doing other things, but that doesn't fit a tantrum. So when we talk about specific, observable, and measurable, it's something we can observe, it's something we can measure, and it's so specific that you and I can watch the same video or watch the same behavior, watch the same incident, and agree on what was happening, and that it would fit that definition. We could probably do an entire video on that, just this slide, but we're going to move on because we're going to be talking about other things and it will make more sense as we go. Again, another one that could be a completely different training, but we'll talk about this in very basic terms. And I know that most of our families, you've been around, you've had in-home programs, you've had other parent trainings, and this is sort of some primers and some different way to present things, especially during distance learning when there's more responsibility on your part while you're trying to implement lessons and get lessons done at home that you typically don't do, that typically are happening at school. So antecedent behavior consequence, and again, we're talking about functions, but I have to sort of set the foundation for this. But when we look at the antecedent, it could be anything that happens before the behavior. It could be right before, or it could be hours before, and I'll give you actually days before. I can give you an example in a second. The behavior is the actions that you're measuring or tracking. Again, we go back to that. We want it to be specific enough that we all agree, okay, that's a tantrum, that's not. He was crying, hitting, doing all those things. This one wasn't. Consequences is what follows a behavior. And I'm saying here could be good, bad, or neutral. It doesn't mean, typically when we hear about a consequence, it's a negative thing. It doesn't mean it's a negative thing. The consequence could be good. We'll go in a lot of consequences that examples, but that'll be a couple slides from here. This is also where reinforcement occurs. So the reinforcement, the consequence is the reinforcement. The reinforcement occurs after the behavior typically. And we'll talk about that again more, but I want to talk about the antecedent really quick because I know in my own experience that there's a few times where when everyone says, well, whenever I talk to a parent and we talk about, oh, well, he had a big behavior. Okay, what happened? And a lot of times, and it's true, in my own life, it just came out of nowhere. We just don't know where it came from. But what we have to look at with some behaviors, and I can speak to a couple students on campus that I can remember certain students, their antecedents are happening hours. And I've had a student that it was days. So I'll give you those two examples really quick. We have one student that, two students that I can think of on campus, that they'll observe something or something will happen way earlier in the day. And they won't respond. They won't engage in the behavior until hours or a lot longer later. One example is a student that there was an incident on the van. There was some aggression. Something happened. I never really heard what was going on. But that student didn't react in the moment. They got hit or something was taken from them, pushed, maybe their backpack got pushed. I forget exactly what the behavior was. It was from the other student. Well, that student held on to it. So what happened on the van? Nothing happened right after that. But that was the antecedent for behavior that happened 2 or 3 hours later. So if you didn't know about the incident on the van, you wouldn't understand why that student aggressed toward that student that aggressed toward them on the van. So if I'm just going to use Tim and Sue, Tim aggressed against Sue on the van at 8:30 in the morning. Sue didn't react at that point. Sue waited until noon when she had the opportunity when Tim wasn't looking and aggressed against him then. So that was something that the antecedent was at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:30 in the morning. The behavior didn't happen until noon. I'll give you another example that's more of even longer than that. It's, I think, the longest delay from antecedent to behavior that I've ever experienced in my experience in the field. We had a student or a client I was doing at home that we were really working on appropriate behavior in the community. So we're doing a lot of community outings. And it seemed really random to us at first because he would be having a great day. And we're thinking, well, he's having a great day. We'll do a community outing. And the community outing would go horribly. So then we started examining, and other days we'd be having a kind of in the middle day or kind of even a rough day. He'd go in the community and it'd be great. So we couldn't figure out what was, typically when you're having a bad day, you don't want to push it, and you're having a good day, that's the time to teach new things and try new things. Well, it was the opposite for us. So we started talking about, well, what was happening the night before? Did he have a good night's sleep? Did something happen yesterday? No. But then we kept going and we started collecting more data. And the more we talked about it, we realized that it was 2 days before. And this client, was really sensitive to schedule disruptions. So if you had, and I remember one of the things that would really throw him off was he was very rule governed, very schedule oriented, and had expectations. And his thing, his concern, and what really disrupted him, if dad dropped him off at school, dad needed to pick him up. If mom dropped him off, mom had to pick him up. And there were days, and what we figured out was, if mom did drop off and dad picked up, watch out 2 days later. Because he was going to, again, like that other student, right in the moment, didn't seem to be an issue, didn't seem to be an antecedent to anything. He would have a good day. If that was on Monday, dad dropped him off, mom picked him up, Monday afternoon would go fine. Wednesday afternoon, watch out. So when we talk about that antecedent behavior consequence, we talk about anything that happens before the behavior. It can happen well before. So when you're looking at your own student's behavior, you can't just look at that 2 minutes before or 30 seconds before. Sometimes it's got to be days ahead of time. And look at that big picture. And that example is probably pretty extreme, but I know he's not the only student that has that sort of that delay between an antecedent and a behavior. So I think I talked about all this stuff, could be good, bad. Let's look at the consequences now. So a consequence is just what follows. Like I said, it could be good or bad. A good way to look at the consequence is like a paycheck. Like we all go to work, we complete our job, and we get a paycheck at the end. It might be more or less money than we want. Maybe you think we deserve more, but it's enough to keep you working. And if we look at behavior that way, that paycheck is enough for you to keep doing that job. That job is your behavior. So, and that paycheck makes a huge impact. If you didn't get a paycheck, and I put it here, no paycheck eventually means no work. If you stop getting a paycheck, maybe you miss one paycheck, maybe it's late. You might get upset, but you're going to still go to work. If you stop getting paychecks altogether, you're going to stop working. And if we look at that same analogy with behavior, when considering the consequences, if you stop getting the paycheck for your behavior, you're not going to do it anymore, and that's going to change a lot of different things. So, but let's talk about this too. Let's go back to sort of the slide, because I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later. When considering the consequence, we need to look at the function. So the way the behavior is reinforced. A paycheck, and we'll talk about it in a second. Basically, there are different kinds of paychecks that serve different needs. So in applied behavior analysis, we talk about functions. And the 4 functions that we categorize reinforcement, the first one is access. So you're gaining access to the thing, and I'm using the student as an example, but you're gaining access to the thing you want. A lot of times when we talk about access, it might be a food item, it might be tablet time, it might be going outside. We'll give more examples about that later, but you're gaining access to something. Typically, it's a tangible item. It's typically. Then we look at attention. And again, when we talk about consequences, social attention from others, it might not be good attention or bad attention. I've had students and clients over the years that really don't care about getting praise. They just want that face time. I had a few students that I had to talk to the parents, and we figured it out that he just wanted, it was like the negotiation. He just wanted the FaceTime. He wanted that conflict because then he knew you were with him. He didn't really mind if you were upset with him because you were still with him. And that attention was more important to him than whether or not it was, a good talk or a bad talk, or good attention, bad attention. The next one is escape or avoidance. That's typically when you're trying to, especially in the classroom, you're trying to escape a demand. And at home, probably the same thing. Hey, it's time to sit down and do lessons. That's when you might see behavior. Or you're engaged in an activity that you don't really want to engage in. You're going to try to engage in a behavior, and the function is to escape that behavior or avoid it, or escape that task or avoid it. The other thing that happens a lot of times in the classroom, because there's a lot of students there and a lot of activity, is it might be something they don't like. At home too, could be the same thing. If there's loud music on, if there's a dog barking, if there's something that's scary, that escape avoidance might take and we'll talk about a couple different examples there. But if, and this is something that happens quite frequently in classes, a lot of our students are sensitive to sound, loud sounds. And if another student is engaged in a really loud tantrum or yelling or something, even if it's yelling out of pleasure, they're going to want to escape that. They don't want to be around those loud sounds. So they might engage in behavior that the function is to escape that. If I don't like that sound and I don't have a way to say, again, we're going back a little bit, if I don't have a way to say, I need to go outside, it's too loud in here, I don't like this, I'm going to have to engage in a different behavior to get that escape, to avoid that stimuli, the noise. And then we have the hardest one, I think, to me is the hardest one, but it's the automatic and the sensory. It's something that we can't necessarily see, but it's mostly an internal condition. It can be a taste, it could be a smell, it could be a feel, but it's not a tangible, it's not that attention, and you're not escaping anything. So that one's a little bit harder. And again, these could all be really long videos. Each one of these could be hours, really, if we want to get deep down into it. The note down there, some behaviors are served by more than one function. So a tantrum could be served I have an example in a couple slides here. It could be served by more than one. So just because it's a tantrum, you don't want to think, well, it has to be for access, or has to be for attention, it has to be for escape. It could be serving multiple. So we want to make sure that when we're looking at behavior, we want to make sure that we're examining all of them and make sure that we are hitting all of those functions, or we're making sure that which one of those functions is really present and really being served by that behavior. So let's look at some common behaviors and what functions they might be served by. So eloping, so leaving the area, running out of the house or classroom. Let's go look at some possible functions that could be serving. It could be access. It could be they just want to go outside, they want to grab leaves or dirt. I can think of a couple of students that do that. It could also be attention. They enjoy being chased. They like making the game. That one, just a hint on that one, when you have a student or client that runs, and when you grab them and bring them back inside, they're giggling, it might be attention, because that to them is a game. Again, good attention, bad attention. They want to be chased. And if I don't have a way to ask to be chased, I'm just going to start running because I know you're going to chase me, and we're going to start that game. I've had some students and clients over the years that have engaged in some pretty interesting behaviors to get that attention, because they'll do things they know you can't ignore. And then they know they get that attention. So eloping, again, escape, avoidance, tasks, or something else in the environment. Again, we talked about that, about loud sounds, loud music, someone else having a tantrum. If you don't like that sound, it could be something, it could be almost anything. If they don't have other way to escape and say, hey, I don't like what's going on here, I want to go outside, they might engage in eloping. I've had students that don't like, I had one, I remember this from many, many years ago. He hated Barney. And I remember I was with him at school, and it was a rainy day, and they did inside recess, and they put a Barney video on, and he could not handle it. He had to escape Barney. First, he tried to turn it off, which is another escape avoidance. He tried to turn it off. He doesn't want to do it. You might see that during Zoom calls. If your student doesn't really want to engage in a Zoom call, they're going to try to turn it off. That's not eloping, but that's something else. It's the function would be escape avoid. Okay, let's talk about the last one, automatic or sensory. So the eloping, kind of the attention, kind of goes with the attention. They might just like running. They might like the feeling of the sunlight or the breeze on their skin or on their face. That one is a little harder. They might like, it's a little harder to tease out, but we have those students that are just bolters, and they're not going to anything. For that student that likes to grab the leaves or the dirt or bark, we have a few students that love the bark. If they're not going for the bark, and they're not going for the leaves, and they're not going outside, and they're not really happy about you running after them, they're not giggling about that, it might just be the feeling of running. And we know there's a lot of students that like just running and being outside and going. That movement is enough for them. So let's move on to the next one. A tantrum. So again, I'm going to use a similar definition that we used before, but a tantrum. So yelling to be heard 30 or more feet away, throwing items, and I think I'm blocking myself here, but crying with tears. Let's go through all the functions. Access. It might be to receive a toy or function, food item to calm down with. We've all seen this, and we've all done this, especially, we're taught as parents, we're taught if your baby's crying, change the diaper, feed them, rock them, change the environment, pick them up. Well, as we get older, we still might get that. We don't know if our student is hungry. We don't know if they're upset. We might end up giving them something to calm them down, because we know that works. So what might have worked at a year old or at 6 months old, we sort of have to change how we react and find different ways to calm down. And that's going to be a replacement behavior. We'll talk about that in a second. Attention. You might, if you start yelling and screaming and crying, all that stuff, you're going to get attention. And that's why there's a lot of times in ABA, we talk about extinction and ignoring. And a lot of times we'll talk about planned ignoring, where you don't give attention. It's because that attention might be feeding that behavior. It might be that paycheck that they're looking for. Escape, avoid. It could be for tasks. Again, if there's a task in front of them or something else in the environment they don't want to deal with, that's a pretty clear one. You engage in a tantrum, you're going to escape the demand. You can't make me sort letters or write my name if I'm yelling and screaming and throwing items and crying with tears. It's an incompatible behavior. I can't do both at the same time. And then automatic sensory. And this one's, I think for tantrums, a little lower, but it does happen. The example I gave is watching items explode on the floor. If you throw something, a drink, some students really like watching things splash on the ground. I've been a victim of that, getting splashed on. I've also had students that like the tears. Like once they start to, they like that feeling. It's a different feel. It's wet and it's also salty. There's a sensory component to that they might be accessing. And I'm giving all these examples. The idea, the thought that one behavior could be served by all of them, it's on the rarer side. What you're typically going to see is maybe one or two. They might use tantrum to get access to things. They might do tantrum to escape. You're not often going to see all four. Usually it's, multifunction is not that rare. All four functions, pretty rare. Let's look at aggression. So striking others on the arm or shoulder with an open hand. So that would be an open hand slap. Again, this is very similar to the tantrum. You might be receiving a toy. If there's something they want, they reach for it and you block them and they start hitting you, you're going to put your arms up, you're going to block. You might walk away to try to avoid that. They might then go over and get that item that they want. And that's going to serve as reinforcement. Attention, you're going to receive attention when you start hitting. That's, again, we kind of go back to the plain ignoring. If you say stop hitting, it's still attention. It's even if you're saying, I'm not going to do it on video, but like yell it, stop hitting, that's still attention. And for some of our students, some of our clients, they don't care about the difference between good attention, bad attention, because it also could be serving as an escape. I know that if you're yelling at me to stop hitting, that I'm avoiding that task. If I'm hitting you, I'm not sorting, I'm not brushing my teeth, I'm not engaging in the task that I'm trying to avoid. So again, we talk about that multifunction. Striking others with an open hand, especially with both hands, it's incompatible with a sorting task. It's incompatible with sorting the laundry or vacuuming or doing a seated lesson or reading a book. I guess you could be holding a book with one hand and hitting someone with the other, but it's not optimal. And then the last one is automatic or sensory, especially with our sensory seeking students, and we know who they are, that really like the contact. There's so many students that will work for a high five, and that could be some social tension there, but there's students, and I've had a few over the years, that just like the hitting, that contact, that smack. That aggression could be giving them that piece. I've had a few students, like if you have a student that pinches, they like that pinch, especially that inner part of the arm on the bicep. It's always, or the upper part of the chest, you get the soft skin up there. You know those students that like those little things, that feeling of physical contact. It might not be pleasant for you, but they like that feel. If you ever have a student or a client or one of your children likes the jumping, or we have, I have a crash pad in my house, but kids that like jumping and falling and doing all the things that you and I probably think, I don't really like that, but it serves a function for them. And it might be that sensory feeling. Again, for the aggression, it's harder to tease out. More than most often for aggression, it's probably access, might be some attention, and it's a lot of escape. Those three are where you're probably going to see a lot of aggression. But you have to look at what happens. You have to look at that reinforcement. You have to look at that antecedent behavior consequence. As I say, and I'm going to say this, and I say this in every video, I'm going to say it right here. I'll probably say it at the end again. Work with your in-home program. Work with the people that you have. Especially if in-home programs are in the home right now, they can observe the behaviors. Excuse me. And they can help you determine which one of these is really going on, and which one we really need to serve. So this is more of just an overview of those functions. So then when we get to the next few slides, but please reach out to those folks. Reach out to your teacher. You can always reach out to me as well. So when we observe maladaptive behaviors, those behaviors fall under one of those functions we discussed, one or more. I should have put in more or more in there. So escape, avoid, attention, access, automatic, sensory. So we'd rather see the maladaptive behavior go away, just gone. But even if the behavior goes away, that function still remains. So even if they don't engage in tantrum anymore, and we've seen this, I think, most of our families have seen this. You get rid of tantrums, or maybe you get rid of aggression, but they still have tantrums. The tantrum's serving the same thing. If they were both serving access and escape, well, that need, if you think about well, I guess I'm going to return, I went back to it down here. You're returning to the paycheck analogy. Just because that job doesn't give you a paycheck anymore, even if we get rid of let's say we get rid of aggression, even if aggression doesn't get that paycheck anymore and you stop doing it, doesn't mean that you don't need any more money. It just means you need a new paying job. And that's where we see, I always, whenever we have behaviors, and especially when we have multiple behaviors for students, I always call it like whack-a-mole, where you knock down the tantrum, but then it comes aggression. You knock down the aggression, then it becomes eloping or it becomes something else. It always changes. And because, again, going back to, I think, slide number 2, the function is still there. They still want to access the things they want to access. They want to escape the things they want to escape. They want the attention still. They want that automatic. They want all those functions. Those functions are still there. We still need money. Even if your job stops paying you, especially in this climate, just because your job doesn't pay you anymore doesn't mean you don't need money. It just means you need a new job. So we need to identify new paying jobs for our students. And those are functionally equivalent replacement behaviors to replace those maladaptive behaviors. So this is a new job that's earn the same paycheck. So if a tantrum used to be fed by access or attention or escape, then we need to give them a different way, but it's going to be the same function. So I said it here, functionally equivalent. The new job behavior serves the same function. So if it's access, we need a new access. If it's escape, we want a new escape. So the example I gave here was if a student engages in a tantrum to escape a sorting task, sorting lesson, the functionally equivalent replacement behavior might be requesting a break. It's serving the same function. You're trying to escape. Well, a break away from that task is an escape. Requesting a different lesson. Again, getting away from sorting, I'd rather do a puzzle. Can I do a puzzle instead? Can I go sort some laundry? Can I do something else? Anything else but this? That's still going to escape. The function is to escape the sorting lesson or whatever it might be. So it's serving the same function again. And then requesting help if the task is too difficult. And this is escape avoid, but if we're that it's another one to include in there because that's a crucial one. If something's too difficult, you might see behaviors because they don't know how to do it. And then they're getting frustrated with it. And rather than keep trying and failing and having that difficulty, they might just engage in a behavior because then they just get to escape the whole thing. But requesting help, like, hey, this is too hard for me. Again, you're going to get all these, especially a tantrum. You might get a tantrum because they get frustrated. They can't do something or they know it doesn't work. Some of our students are very, very goal driven and they want to finish things. They want to do things in a certain way. And they want that, whether it's repetition or order, they want things to be in a certain order. If they can't do that, that's going to be frustrating. And you might get a tantrum out of frustration because they can't access what they want, which is completion and serving their desired result, which is they want something in a certain way. If you ever have a student that is a puzzle, I would say a puzzle kid, but just someone who loves puzzles, if you can't make one of them fit, you get upset. And because you can't access the puzzle to be the way that you want it to, you can't get the puzzle to work. That is going to get a tantrum. That's going to get you upset. And requesting help is a way to avoid that. And it also serves the same function. So the student can use the break to escape instead of a tantrum. So I kind of talked about that already. Let's look at another one. So if a student elopes to go outside to gather dirt, so that would be access, or get chased. So that's attention and sensory. The third might be request a walk outside. That's going to be the access part of it. Request a bucket of dirt. That's another access one. Request a game of chase. There's the attention, might also be some sensory, or request a different physical activity other than chase. That could be the attention, and it could also be the sensory. If I have a student that elopes a lot to go outside, if without the dirt, let's just say the chasing part, we might do a trampoline. We might stay on the trampoline, and I hold your hands, and you jump on the trampoline for 30 seconds, for a minute, to get that sensory part of it. To kind of serve that function, bring that down a little bit, but there still might be some other things. Jumping on a trampoline isn't going to make your desire for dirt disappear or bark or whatever it might be. It's just not going to serve the same function. So you've got to make sure if there's a behavior that has both, you got to make sure that you're hitting both. So the student requests a walk instead of eloping. So the new job is you request a walk. So you're getting the same paycheck. The paycheck is you get to play outside, but the job is different. So this is, again, I try to make these shorter. I know I've done some really long ones. I'm trying to make this a little bit shorter, so I don't know where we are in timing. But I'm going to go sort of a final summary. So every behavior can be viewed as a communication. And when you're looking at it, you really need to examine the paycheck. And the paycheck is the function and the reinforcement. What are they getting out of it? And how are they getting out of it? Is it that escape? Is it avoidance? Is it the sensory stuff? And then that the maladaptive behavior earned. So what does that paycheck really mean? And then using that information to determine what other jobs, so replacement behaviors, could earn the same paycheck. One thing I didn't address, and I could have put another slide in here, but it's a good part to include here, is teach those new jobs throughout the day, not just when you see those maladaptive behaviors begin. If you're always having a rough day, a rough time, and you're having a lot of tantrums, or let's just use tantrums or aggression during lesson time, and you realize that you work with your in-home program, or you look at our behavior plans when we look at things, and we have all of this information on there, and you look at it and you examine it, and you realize, oh, he's trying to escape. Well, you don't just teach him to ask for a break in that task. You can have your student ask for a break in any number of opportunities. It can be a break from a TV show. It can be a break from something else. If you teach them that they can take breaks throughout the day, then they're going to utilize that skill, that new job. They're going to utilize it when it's most important. So you don't just want to, we all talk about, like, I'm sure most parents have seen the behavior cycle. You know that the behavior goes up and there's a peak and then it comes down. Well, when you hit that peak, it's not a teachable moment. The student's not learning in that time. It's frustrating for you. You're trying to deal with behavior, and they're also oftentimes not able to receive that teaching. They're not there yet. But if you teach that outside of that, what you'll see is, hopefully, when you see it start to ramp up, if you see a tantrum start to get up, or you're going to present a task that's often results in a tantrum, if you taught it before and you even teach it right before, and you show them, hey, it's time to sort. Do you want to break first? Do you want to do sorting first, or matching, or a puzzle, or coloring, or writing your name? You can always and we've talked about all those different ways: the choices, the choice board, the core board, the schedules, the timers. When you teach any of those things, you want to teach them all the time, not just when the bad things happen, because it's going to be harder. It's harder for you to get in there and teach it, and it's just not the optimal time for your student to learn a new skill. So hopefully this helps. Again, I always say this: check in with your teacher, contact us if you need any help. Again, if you have an in-home program, please utilize them, and really, ask for parent training if that's within their scope. Make sure that you're utilizing all the supports that you have available to you. I look forward to the next video. Again, if you ever have a topic that you'd like me to discuss on these, please contact your teacher and I can make a new video. Until next time, thank you very much, and bye-bye.